A Viking warrior once sat down and carved a message into the wall of an ancient tomb in Orkney, Scotland. It read, "These runes were carved by the best rune carver in the Western Ocean." Another Viking, clearly not impressed, carved right next to it, "Ingigirth is the most beautiful of all women." This wasn't a sacred ritual. This wasn't a military declaration. These were bored men in a 5,000-year-old tomb, killing time. Source, Maisho, runic inscriptions, Orkney. Dated to 12th century, documented by scholars including R.I. Page. And that right there tells you something that Hollywood never will. Vikings weren't always charging into battle with axes raised. Most of the time, they were sitting around, waiting, thinking, creating. And what they did with that time, that's what this video is about. Here's a fact that destroys the movie version of Vikings immediately. The raiding season lasted roughly 3 to 4 months, late spring to early autumn. That means for the other 8 months of the year, most Vikings were farmers. Source, Neil Price, Children of Ash and Elm, Oxford University Press 2020. They grew barley, rye, and oats. They raised cattle and sheep. They repaired tools. They maintained longhouses. The average Viking male spent far more time holding a plow than an axe, and winters in Scandinavia were brutal. We're talking about regions where daylight could shrink to 4 or 5 hours a day. You're stuck inside. It's dark. It's cold. The snow isn't going anywhere. What do you do? Now here's where it gets fascinating, because the answer isn't what you'd expect. Vikings didn't simply endure the downtime. They built an entire culture around it. Their longhouses, the main communal structure, weren't just shelters. Archaeological excavations at Hedeby in Denmark and Borg in Norway revealed longhouses stretching up to 83 meters long, filled with people, filled with animals, filled with noise, smell, heat, and entertainment. Source, archaeological findings at Borg, Lofoten, Hedeby excavations, documented by the Schleswig-Holstein State Museums. The Longhouse was their cinema, their sports bar, their concert hall, all in one smoky, fire-lit room. Let's start with the thing they were absolutely obsessed with: board games. Vikings played a game called Hnefatafl, pronounced roughly Nefatafl, and they played it everywhere. Game boards have been found in graves, in ships, in trading posts across Scandinavia, Britain, and Iceland. Source, archaeological finds at Gokstad Ship Burial, Norway Thattai, Ballandary Game Board, Ireland, National Museum of Ireland. The rules: one player commands a king and his defenders in the center. The other commands attackers surrounding them. It's strategic. It's asymmetric. It's nothing like chess, and in many ways, more complex. What's remarkable is that Hnefatafl pieces have been found as far as Baffin Island in Canada, meaning Vikings brought their board games all the way to North America. Surprise for viewers. They didn't just play Hnefatafl either. Dice made from bone and antler have been recovered in massive quantities. At the trading town of Hedeby alone, dozens of bone dice were excavated, suggesting gambling was common, competitive, and probably loud. Source, Hedeby Archaeological Excavations, Schleswig-Holstein State Museums. Now let's talk about storytelling, because this was arguably the most powerful weapon against boredom in the Viking world. The Norse oral tradition was extraordinary. Before the sagas were ever written down, mostly in 13th century Iceland, these stories existed purely in memory, passed from mouth to mouth across generations. Tales of Odin sacrificing his eye for wisdom, of Thor's hammer being stolen by giants, of Loki's catastrophic betrayals. Source, Prose Edda, Snorri Sturluson, c. 1220, Poetic Edda, compiled c. 13th century. But here's the part that surprises people. These weren't just entertaining stories. They were competitive performances. Norse poets, called skalds, were professional verbal athletes. They competed in front of crowds. A good skald could make a warrior famous forever. A bad one could destroy a reputation with a single insulting verse. Source, King Sagas, Heimskringla, Snorri Sturluson. Composing poetry wasn't soft. In Viking culture, it was a display of power. Here's where most documentaries stop. Games and stories, fine. But there's a layer beneath that almost nobody covers. Vikings were obsessed with physical competitions, but not the ones you think. Yes, there was wrestling. The Old Norse form was called glima, and it's still practiced in Iceland today, making it one of the oldest continuously practiced sports in the world. Source: Gragos, Medieval Icelandic Law Code, Icelandic Glima, Federation Records. But they also competed in swimming races, stone lifting, and a game called Nataleikr, a ball game played with sticks that some historians believe may be an ancestor of modern field hockey or hurling. The exact rules of Nataleikr are debated. The sagas mention it frequently, but never fully explain it, which tells you something. Everyone already knew how to play. Source: Egil Saga, Gisla Saga, multiple references to Nataleikr. Surprise too for viewers. But here is the thing that genuinely floors people when they first hear it. Vikings carved and crafted as a serious leisure activity, not just runes on tomb walls. We're talking intricate wood carving, metalwork, and textile production, done not purely for function, but for artistic expression. The Oseberg ship burial, excavated in Norway in 1904, contained wooden carvings of such extraordinary complexity and beauty that modern craftsmen struggle to replicate them even with modern tools. Source: Oseberg ship burial, Museum of Cultural History, University of Oslo, excavated 1904. And here's the detail that changes everything. Analysis of the carving styles on the Oseberg ship suggests multiple different artists worked on it, each with a distinct personal style. These weren't nameless craftsmen following orders. They were individuals expressing themselves. Surprise number 3 for viewers. And then there's something even more unexpected: Viking women and textile art. Fragments of extraordinarily complex tapestries were also found in the Oseberg burial. The weaving techniques used required not just skill, but advanced mathematical thinking to plan and execute the patterns. Source: Oseberg Textile Finds. Analysis by scholars including Margareta Knockert. This wasn't killing time. This was mastery. Step back and look at all of this together. Board games requiring strategic thinking, poetry as competitive performance, physical contests, intricate art, mathematical weaving. What does this tell us about who the Vikings actually were? It tells us they had a deep relationship with excellence. There's a concept embedded throughout the Norse sagas called drengskapur, a word that roughly translates to the code of conduct of a worthy man. It included courage, yes, but it also included skill, creativity, and the pursuit of mastery in whatever you turned your hands to. Source: Scholarly Analysis of Drengskapur in Norse Culture, Judith Jesch, The Viking Diaspora, 2015. Boredom. In the Viking worldview wasn't something to simply endure. It was a test. How you spent your idle hours revealed your character. A man who gambled recklessly, told no memorable stories, built nothing, and mastered nothing was not respected, regardless of how many raids he'd been on. The sagas make this clear repeatedly. Warriors who couldn't compose a verse, who had no craft, who contributed nothing to the longhouse culture, are described with subtle but unmistakable contempt. Source: Egil Saga, Njal Saga, recurring characterization themes. There's also something psychologically modern here that's easy to miss. These were people living with extreme violence and extreme uncertainty. Raids could fail, ships could sink, winters could kill. The games, the stories, the craftsmanship, these weren't distractions from that reality. They were the mechanism for processing it. Neuroscientists today would recognize this immediately. Repetitive, skilled craft reduces anxiety. Competitive games create controlled risk. Storytelling builds shared identity and psychological resilience. The Vikings didn't have the vocabulary for any of that, but they figured it out anyway. We spend so much time talking about what Vikings destroyed: the monasteries, the villages, the kingdoms they dismantled. But in those long, dark winters, in the firelit longhouses of Scandinavia, they were also building something, a culture that valued craft over laziness, story over silence, mastery over mere survival. The man who carved "I am the best rune carver in the Western Ocean" on that ancient tomb wall in Orkney, he wasn't being arrogant, he was doing exactly what his culture taught him to do. Leave a mark. Be remembered. Don't waste the time you have. That's Unchained Past. If this made you see something differently, you know what to do.